Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 just ignited a massive community panic over its final title and release window. Players are legitimately losing their minds decoding teasers because the finale might actually drop way sooner than anyone expected. Square Enix officially locked in January 2027 for their $35 Ascend the Shinra Tower board game, doubling down that Part 3's development is perfectly on schedule. Now, I honestly think this tabletop drop is just a highly calculated distraction. Like, in my opinion, they're obviously using it to plug a massive content gap. I, for one, am convinced we're getting a real trailer before that board game even ships. But while that official January 2027 timeline looks totally innocent on paper, what I think the community has already figured out about the actual subtitle paints a completely different and honestly insane picture. Now, the big corporate distraction dropping right now is obviously Ascend the Shinra Tower. It's a $35 cooperative balancing game, basically an official Final Fantasy VII Jenga that is confirmed to ship in January 2027. The official product listing explicitly states that all newly created artwork featured on the package and on the game's wooden components is fully supervised by Tetsuya Nomura. And honestly, I think that specific phrasing highlighting Nomura's direct supervision over exactly 54 wall tiles and 24 wooden characters is a massive red flag. In my opinion, Square Enix is deliberately slapping his prestige onto a tabletop filler product just to validate the price tag and keep us fed. They didn't just say the game was inspired by the series. They made absolutely sure you knew the original story concept creator was directly involved with the wooden blocks, which tells me they are terrified of the current content drought. I for one am not falling for it, and the hardcore players certainly aren't either. And this is where things start to get interesting, because the fans aren't actually staring at the board game at all. They are aggressively hunting down the actual title of Part 3, according to a massive thread blowing up on the Final Fantasy Reddit right now. A huge chunk of the community is totally convinced that the real subtitle has been staring us in the face for years. The leading theory points all the way back to an early remake trailer that flashed the phrase "The return draws closer" on screen, and the text lingered there for an oddly long amount of time. But if we accept that Return is actually the name, we have to confront the other leaks and data means popping off alongside it. Some deep dive fans are pushing specific claims that the color of the final Part 3 logo is going to be orange, specifically tying it back to the color of the whispers at the very end of Remake. I honestly think this breadcrumb trail is 100% intentional. Square Enix loves burying their biggest secrets in plain sight, and the fact that the community is already zeroing in on an orange logo and the word return tells me the end game is completely locked in behind closed doors. But the bigger story here is what this potential title actually means for the timeline. Now, this is exactly where the community theories and my own personal hot takes collide. Because if we look at the main title contenders right now, specifically Return, Redux, and Reunite, the fan base is completely fractured over what kind of ending we are actually getting. I was reading a massive thread on the FF7 Remake subreddit just last night, and players were literally writing essays about how Return is the only logical choice because of that one specific line from the 2020 trailer. But honestly, I think Return is a terribly boring title. I'm kind of conflicted because part of me respects the early foreshadowing, but to me, Return just sounds like a cheap, direct-to-DVD sci-fi sequel. In my opinion, the title absolutely has to be Reunite. And that right there is where the real emotional stakes of this entire decade-long project actually lie. Think about it. We have spent literal years since April 2020 theorizing about multiple timelines, crying over Aerith's fate, and trying to figure out how Zack is still breathing. If the final game is called Return, that implies we are just circling back to the original 1997 ending. It means all this timeline hopping was just a massive marketing gimmick, and we are returning to the exact same depressing fate where the whispers win and nothing actually changes. The community is legitimately terrified of this. They stand to lose all the hope and emotional investment that Remake and Rebirth spent hundreds of hours building up. But if the title is Reunite, that changes the entire DNA of the franchise. It implies the fractured timelines are actually going to crash together. We're talking about Cloud, Zack, and Aerith fighting Sephiroth side by side in one unified 4K reality. I, for one, am banking hard on Reunite because frankly, if Square Enix makes me play through 150 hours of this trilogy just to give me the exact same ending I already played on my chunky PS1 CRT TV, I will personally throw my console out the window. Like, I'm fully serious, I will snap my disc in half on stream. But now, let's talk about the timeline, because this is the thing that has everyone going crazy. The community is looking at this $35 Ascend the Shinra Tower board game dropping in January 2027, and they're connecting dots like a conspiracy board. A specific Reddit user named Burrito_Pounder, yes, that is their real handle, pointed out something brilliant. They noted that Square Enix always drops their supplementary filler merchandise right before a mainline event to completely clear the marketing runway. If this physical board game is getting pushed out of the way in January 2027, it means the game itself can't be far behind. Like, they are actively clearing the schedule, which leads us right back to the biggest, most terrifying question from the very beginning. If the tabletop game is just the corporate distraction, when exactly is the actual curtain dropping on Part 3's release date, and just how soon do we have to prepare for the end? Now, if we step back and look at the entire board Square Enix is playing right now, the final verdict is honestly pretty clear. They are meticulously positioning all of their pieces for a massive, franchise-defining finale. The fact that Rebirth literally just dropped on Xbox Series X and the Switch 2 proves they are frantically trying to build the absolute largest possible install base right before Part 3 drops. They want everyone caught up. Like, they aren't just making a game anymore, they are trying to orchestrate an unavoidable global industry event. In my opinion, this $35 Ascend the Shinra Tower board game, slated for January 2027, is the absolute final appetizer before the main course. It is the definitive signal that the waiting period is almost over. I firmly believe we are getting the official Part 3 reveal, complete with a cinematic teaser and the final confirmed subtitle, at a major stage like Summer Game Fest or the Game Awards later this year. They have to clear the deck by early 2027. And honestly, this is where the broader implications for the studio get incredibly serious, because the financial and cultural stakes could not possibly be higher. Square Enix has bet an unbelievable amount of money, time, and corporate reputation on this remake trilogy. If they fumble the ending, if they give us a safe, cowardly conclusion under a boring title like Return, it doesn't just ruin this specific game. It retroactively taints the entire 150-hour journey, and honestly, it threatens to damage the untouchable legacy of the original 1997 masterpiece. I honestly think the developers are terrified of messing this up. You don't bring a legend like Tetsuya Nomura in to explicitly supervise the artwork on exactly 24 wooden board game characters and 54 wall tiles unless you are obsessively controlling every single microscopic aspect of the Final Fantasy VII brand right now. They are hyper-aware of the community's massive expectations, which is exactly why my final verdict is that the title will heavily lean toward Reunite or something functionally identical. It has to be a title that boldly promises a massive timeline-merging climax rather than a depressing cyclical reset. Like, they absolutely have to deliver the ultimate fan service payoff where the surviving characters from every single splintered reality finally converge for one last stand. This impending finale is going to dictate the future of the Final Fantasy franchise for the next 10 years. If they actually stick the landing and give us the unified next-gen fight against Sephiroth that players have been dreaming of since that infamous PS3 tech demo, it will instantly go down as one of the greatest technical and narrative achievements in gaming history. But if they chicken out and force us back into the exact same tragic timeline we've already experienced, the community backlash will be absolutely nuclear. I, for one, am choosing to stay optimistic because the breadcrumbs are all pointing towards something massive, but I'm watching that January 2027 board game release date like a hawk, because the second that tabletop filler is officially out of the way, the marketing blitz for Part 3 is going to be utterly deafening. So I want to hear from you guys down in the comments. Do you genuinely believe the lingering text from that 2020 trailer means Return is 100% locked in as the final title, or are you praying that Square Enix pivots to something like Reunite so we can actually merge these fractured timelines once and for all? Let me know exactly where you stand. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you know what he's on, and until next time, this has been Tuzo, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video.